Hi, everyone. My name is Liz. I work in public programs here at the Japanese American National Museum. And on behalf of the museum, I wanted to thank you all for making some time this afternoon to be with us. And I also wanted to thank our partners at the Nikkei Genealogical Society for their ongoing support of the museum and for working with us to put on this event. We're so excited to have the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation with us today. They've been a longtime supporter and friend of the museum. Their mission to inspire a more equitable and inclusive future, one that embodies how immigrants make nations better, is timely and very necessary, especially in this time. So to share more about the foundation and their important work, I want to welcome Danielle Wetmore, the Director of Education, to the stage.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be here and be able to spend this time with you all. I don't take for granted any moment that anybody takes time outside of their day to learn about history, whether it's their own family history or wider histories of folks. At Angel Island, immigrants were processed through there from 1910 to 1940. About 1 million immigrants passed through the port of San Francisco in that time period. And people came to Angel Island from 80 different countries. And whatever your connection to Angel Island is, whether it is a family connection, you have a family member that stepped foot on Angel Island, or you happen to live in the United States, you are connected to Angel Island because the immigrants who were or were not let through Angel Island shape the neighborhoods we have today. And questions that were front and center during the time of immigrant processing on Angel Island. Who is welcome to come into America? Who is considered a dangerous immigrant? Who is considered a safe immigrant? Who is considered valuable? Are questions that we're still facing today, each and every day. Unfortunately, when I was in school and I thought we'd learned from the history of Angel Island and we had learned from moving forward and created a more inclusive and better place, our work is still here. And so I look back at the history of Angel Island and the immigrants who were detained there and the resilience that they showed. They fought every step of the way to make sure that they would fight for a more inclusive future. No immigrant who came through Angel Island thought, yeah, this is fine. They worked to make it better, and their descendants worked to make sure that these histories weren't erased. And so it's our job to continue with this. And so with that, first I'll pass it back to Liz, and then I'll pass it to Grant.
Thank you, Danielle. Wow, yeah, so with that, bringing up our next speaker is Grant Din. Grant Din is an expert in genealogical and historical research. His research spans the US, China, and Japan. He has led workshops and published articles in genealogical and historical publications and serves on the California Genealogical Society board. He holds degrees from Yale, Claremont Graduate University, and a genealogical research certificate from Boston University. He has also shared on Discover Nikkei, a project at JANM, some of the stories of the 700 plus Americans of Japanese descent who were arrested by the FBI in Hawaii and the West Coast after Pearl Harbor and spent some time on Angel Island. So here to talk more about that, Grant Din.
Thanks, Liz. Just want to make sure. Thank you all for coming today. It's great to see you and to see Danielle, who, even though she's based in San Francisco, spends a lot of time in the LA area, and Melinda Yamane Crawford from Nikkei Gen, who invited me to give this talk. And it's a history that you might know a little bit about, but I'm hoping you'll know a lot about by the time we're done today. So these are some of the men who were held on Angel Island during World War II. But before I talk about them, I'll talk a little bit about the history of Angel Island, how it pertained to Japanese Americans or Japanese immigrants. So we'll talk about a quick history of the Japanese immigrants, how they were treated as enemy aliens at Sharp Park and Angel Island, and resources to help you learn more. And then I'm going to try real hard to get through to talk about how the Tonai family, which I'm married into, tells the story of the grandfather of the family who was also arrested right after Pearl Harbor on December 7th and taken to the LA County Jail. So we'll get to that in a minute. So Angel Island, as Danielle mentioned, housed a U.S. immigration station for 30 years, 1910 to 1940. It was based on the success of Ellis Island in New York. And it was a place, before that, there was an immigration shed in San Francisco, and it was overcrowded and unsafe. And also, people, if they were being questioned by the government and had a question that they were interrogated for and didn't know the answer, would yell out to the street to try to see if anyone could help them out. So putting the immigration station on the island made that very difficult. Many of them were picture brides from Japan, and we'll get into the reasons for that, which a lot of you know already. And you can still come to the immigration station today. You can take a ferry and take a tour. It's a really wonderful stop if you're coming up to the bay. This is meant to show the women's quarters. Originally, that was part of the same building, but it was so full of men that they moved that to the administration building. So why was it the station built? Mostly to keep people out. Whereas Ellis Island was a kind of a welcoming place with the Statue of Liberty nearby, Angel Island was really the guardian of the Western Gate. Who came through Angel Island? Danielle mentioned the million people who were processed on the island coming and going. But about 85,000 Japanese came into San Francisco Harbor during those 30 years. We don't know for sure how many were actually held on Angel Island, but there are at least 9,000 case files in the National Archives of Angel Island immigrants from Japan. Many others who became citizens have files in other places in the government bureaucracy. And so I mentioned the guardian of Western Gate, and some people call it the Ellis Island of the West, but as I mentioned, it's really not the same. So Chinese immigrants dealt with the Exclusion Acts of 1882 and beyond, which lasted until 1943. And so to get around it, especially after the earthquake, people would say that they were sons and daughters of people who were born here, and that their fathers had been born in the U.S., went back to China to live, and then came back to the U.S. And because of the case of Wong Kim Ark versus the United States, or United States versus Wong Kim Ark in 1898, it established birthright citizenship, which has been in the news a lot lately. But because people had birthright citizenship, they could stay here, and they could bring children who are children of natives. So during the government got wise to these people who said that they had children born of a U.S. native, and so they developed these interrogations where they asked the so-called father or suspected father a lot of questions about their village, about their marriage, about their family members, and then they'd ask the same thing of the children, and they'd have to match pretty much perfectly. Otherwise, they would say, "Oh, this person is not a real child." But even real children would not know these answers. How far is it to the village well? How many windows in your house? What kind of feet does the woman in the third house of the fourth row of your village have? Bound or not? Questions like that. So this is an example of the many poems that are on the walls of the immigration station, where people, in the first one says this person is very frustrated, cannot leave this place. In the second one, this person has been accepted to this country, and even if it is built of jade, this place has turned into a cage. They say it was built of jade because of the green walls that were inside the immigration station, and jade is an auspicious color auspicious stone in Chinese culture. So even though it's a happy place, it's really turned into a cage. And so many Chinese were detained for weeks and even years. For Japanese, because of the Gentlemen's Agreement of 1907 and 1908, it was very difficult for Japanese laborers to come after that time. But those who were here already could send for their families. And so, as most of you know, there's a picture bride system where people would work through a matchmaker in Japan, and the women would come over. So for many of them, their first stop was Angel Island, and as well as Seattle. Those were the two major stops. And there are also Jews escaping the Nazis from Austria and Germany, Russians, children, and Sikhs from Punjab, India. And these are some examples of some of the Japanese immigrants who came through the island. Yeah, I mentioned the gentleman's agreement and picture brides. Okay, so, and especially after the picture bride system lasted about 13 years. In 1920, there was so much antagonism against that system that it was stopped. So some returning Japanese people who were allowed. Oh, so Karl Yoneda was actually born here. He was a U.S. citizen, but he was detained on the island because his cousin who was supposed to pick him up was too busy with being a farmer to come on his behalf. So he wrote this poem about Angel Island. It's a beautiful name, but there are no angels on this island. So Carl Gosso went on to become Karl Yoneda, a labor organizer in the Bay Area, and I think also served in the U.S. military. More picture brides. So Fred Korematsu's mother was a picture bride, and if you go to the National Archives, you'll see this file. And basically, it's very brief questions. They want to know who she is, how are you married, and they always say by photograph. And have you ever met your husband? I've never met him. I've never been in the U.S. before. But the questions of the husband are more to make sure he has the means, financial means, to support her, so she won't become a public charge. And then in this case, the board unanimously said that she should be admitted. And then California did not recognize proxy marriages, so she'd have to go and you'll find these files that she was actually remarried again, only in person this time in the file. And there's certificate of release. She was medically cleared. And this is their marriage certificate. So if you're looking for a file, you'll often find these documents as well. And there's Fred. Same thing for Norm Mineta. His mother was also a picture bride. And interestingly, he was honored by the foundation where Danielle works. And we corresponded with his office. And I said, oh, I found this file for Norm's mother. And I got word back from his office. He'd never seen these documents before. He worked in public service for all his life and had never seen the government documents about his own mother. So same kind of situation where where she and her husband were asked this similar questions. And Koki Tano is also a picture bride. We tell her story on the Immigrant Voices page of the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. If you have first-person stories that you can add about your family, talk to Danielle. Koki Tano's daughter was Chiz Iyama. She was an activist in the Bay Area. And her son was Harry Kitano, a professor at UCLA. And then you might also find documents about people who are returning from Japan. This is a story of my wife, Rosalind Tonai's grandmother and grandfather, and then the 3 U.S.-born daughters who are all there. But you can find good information, such as where they're from in Japan, the actual name of the district, Aichi, it was spelled wrong, for the father, and Gunma for the mother. And then you'll also find really good things here, the actual addresses of the people in the place where they left in Japan. And that can lead, that's also your family often, and that can lead to trips back there. Also finding your koseki, if that's what you're looking for, the family documents. But they often will ask for the address. So there it is in a U.S. document. And then in this case, Rosalind's granduncle, Fujio, was 7 years old, and he was held on the island for 10 days. He had hospital treatment for uncinariasis, I can't pronounce that right. But anyway, it's hookworm. So he was separated from his family and kept in the hospital while he got the drugs. And if families didn't have the money to pay for it, they were often deported. And then recently, Professor Charles Egan found this writing carved into the wall. It's not Chinese poetry. It's a young man who was kept there in June of 1912. And we looked at the location. It's pretty high up on the wall. So he must have been in the top bunk. He was only 12, so he probably climbed up there and he copied what everyone else had done, which was put carvings on the wall. And so it's probably the earliest known writing that we've found, or people have found. And it just mentions his name and where he's from. So Charlie was amazing because Miyamoto was his real family name, but at the time in Japan, they only allowed a certain amount of people out of each village. So Miyamoto went to a different village, bought the name Hokoda, and emigrated that way. And that's what Charlie was able to figure out. And then the Hokoda family every year has a reunion, and they had this year's up in Marin County near Angel Island, and they all got to see the writing where their grandfather, great-grandfather had written on the walls, or carved on the walls. In 1940, the administration building burned down, and so immigration was moved back to San Francisco. So that kind of segues into World War II. The barracks were still around, but the the administration building with their fire, a new building was built to handle the wartime use of the island. So this is the mess hall, in which we have our exhibit in now, which you can see in person. Okay. So these are World War II incarceration camps, which are talked about here at JANM, and many of you are familiar with. But what's best known are the War Relocation Authority camps, the triangles. But there are also a number of camps run by the U.S. Army and the Justice Department. And one of them is Angel Island. Another is Sharp Park, which is in Pacifica, south of San Francisco. And then down here, there's Tuna Canyon, and also, San Pedro doesn't show up on this, but I've seen San Pedro on other maps. But those were places where so-called enemy aliens were held. So this is a publication by the National Park Service where they talk about the various temporary detention stations: Angel Island, San Pedro, Sharp Park, Tuna Canyon. Ellis Island was also used for this purpose. So, this was supposed to go in sequence. Anyway, so about 600, so this is all prefaced by the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which allowed for, during times of war, people from so-called alien enemy countries to basically have no rights. They could be rounded up, they could be captured for any reason at all. And that's what Trump is trying to do by declaring war, just rounding up people from any other country. So in this case, we were actually at war with Japan, Germany, and Italy. So those people were quickly rounded up. So about 600 people from Hawaii were arrested on the islands, and they went through often Sand Island, and also the immigration station in Honolulu before they were sent to the mainland, the continent. There are also other camps on the islands as well. Honouliuli was recently named a National Historic Landmark. Oh, that's one thing. Through the efforts of a lot of volunteers, the Angel Island Immigration Station is now a National Historic Landmark. So that's really important to know. It was established in 1999 on the second try. And it's a very important part of American history. So, and about 100 from the continent, mostly the West Coast, mostly California, were brought to Angel Island. And others went to Sharp Park, which I'll talk about in a minute. The 215 from the West Coast, 100 from Hawaii, and at least 110 from Peru were sent to Sharp Park, which is nearby. So a lot of the U.S.-born, or not the U.S.-born, the West Coast Japanese were screened at Sharp Park first. We have a story of two brothers, and one of them was allowed to go to reunite with his family in another camp, War Relocation Authority camp. And his brother was sent to the Department of Justice camps, and Angel Island was his first stop after Sharp Park. So it's the people who were held, we kind of have looked at many of the records. They're ministers and journalists for their ties often to Japan or their ties with the Japanese-speaking community. But there are others for farmers, laborers, photographers, martial artists, and more. The martial artists, because sometimes they would go to Japan for a tournament. So you see in their files, that's why they were arrested. And there are also some Japanese Americans from the territory of Hawaii who were not enemy aliens, but even before 9066, they were taken away from Hawaii. They were sent all the way to Camp Livingston, Louisiana, but they stopped at Angel Island before and after. And there's some writing on the walls to indicate that. So Sharp Park, I mentioned, was another site where I'm on a volunteer committee that's working to tell that story through a couple of interpretive panels at that site, which is now next to an archery range, and it's run by the city and county of San Francisco. So hopefully by next year we'll have markings there as well. So we actually found our researchers in Maryland at the National Archives found these documents that have the rosters of people who are held at Sharp Park. And they include, if you see these numbers, which just a number, that's mostly people from the West Coast. If you see HJ, I'm pretty sure those are Hawaii Japanese. And then there's PJ, which I interpret as Peruvian Japanese, because Japanese in Latin America were rounded up by their governments on the request of the U.S. government and brought to the U.S. For later prisoner exchange possibilities. And so, but when the war ended, there were people without a country because Peru did not want them back, the U.S. did not want them. And so there's still efforts to this day to try to get reparations for people affected. Okay, so here are some examples of those detained on the island. I'll tell the stories based mostly on the research in our files, but sometimes for the descendants as well. And Jeff's going to start a little video that we have about
the FBI came to pick him up. And for some reason, I knew it wasn't good news when these two white guys, in the dark suits in the four-door sedan came. And so I was outside. And when they put him in the car, I shot him with my Buck Rogers gun. It was not good news. Because, they were really just didn't say anything and just put him in the back seat, got in the front seat, and they drove off. And that was the last I saw of him for quite a while.
Even my mom mentioned it when the FBI came in. They just ransacked the whole house. And they actually took pencils and things like that and broke them in half and took the papers and tore them up, and just things were just strewn everywhere, which I don't know, to me that seems a bit extreme.
Emotion I remember as a kid was when we went to the Tamfaran racetrack, and we got our stable and everything, and she was pregnant with my sister Miyuki at the time. And we all started crying, and then she started crying too, because there's nothing she could do, you know. And she was left alone with a bunch of kids. And so the more she cried, the more I cried. You know, she was trying to keep it together, but then when I look back, she was only, what, like 32 years old. So, you know, being in charge of the family without your husband, it's kind of hard.
I was born on June 30th, 1942 at Tan Fran Racetrack. And my father had already been arrested by that point. I think he was gone in April. So I guess he didn't see me, nor did I see him, nor would I have thought I would have known him anyway as a little tiny baby.
It was Sunday, so that was my day to go to the movies, and the movies is right across from his studio, so they could watch me go in, and I meet my friends, and so it's after the movie. While I was in the movie, the FBI came and checked out the studio, and they went home. And by the time I got home from the movies, they had taken my dad away already. So I didn't get to see him. We could say goodbye next morning if we came by 8 at the courthouse. So my mother had my sister and brother and myself, and we took off in the car to go see my dad. But by the time we got there, they said they were already on their way to Northern California now.
When we did these interviews, Ed Tiphorn, who was director of the foundation, said, well, the talking heads interviews are okay, but we need to bring them to life a little bit more. So we found some recent grads of the animation program at San Francisco State and San Jose State to make the video for us. In the Motoyoshi case, their father was a Buddhist minister based in Alameda, and right after Pearl Harbor, he was taken away to Niles, which is not far away, but because they were in a area where there's a military base, they were taken away. And in Grace's case, we took a while to get her family to help set up the video and everything, and we were able to interview her. And not too long afterwards, she passed away. So I always encourage people, if you're trying to get someone's story, don't wait. We all know that. So Taiichiro Hanzawa was one of the first people we studied because his documents, letters he'd written from Angel Island and I think Lordsburg, New Mexico, were on sale on eBay. One of the former Angel Island State Park staff looked on eBay every once in a while for Angel Island documents, and look, found these letters are for sale. Check it out. And told Casey Dexter Lee from the parks. She told me, I contacted the seller, can you donate these? And he said, oh, I kind of make my living from dumpster diving, basically. But he got me in touch with the person who won, and he made color copies of everything. So they are like this. Taiichiro Hanzawa was a store owner in Maui, Haiku, Maui. He would write letters home after he was arrested. And these were the articles that were for sale. we found some articles that the store was being shut down after many years of retiring. And my conjecture is that they had a big dumpster, threw everything in there, and the guy who sold them found them. And it's actually a fortunate thing because the collector who has them now was able to share them with us. So people who know say that he's just riding home and saying, I'm fine here, don't worry about me. I hope everyone's fine at home, knowing that his letters would be censored, I'm sure. And then, so here are some of the questions that he was asked. Where do you live? Where were you born? Part of Japan? What's your name? All these things like that. And it's there's all these boards of people who were what I call a kangaroo court to see if what these people might be charged with. And so here's their questions among themselves. Do you have anything on his activities in the Japanese community? Oh, he's a number one man here, but not there. And what's your information on his celebration of the emperor's birthday and other Japanese celebrations? So basically, if they celebrate anything culturally relevant, they were considered dangerous. Any subversive activities? No. I wouldn't use the term strongly pro-Japanese, but I consider him pro-Japanese based on what? And then they ask him, have you made any contributions to Japan? Maybe $10 for relief of families remaining in Japan. How many times? Just once. And things about, do you celebrate the emperor's birthday? No, I go to work. And then I love this. Do you still belong to Japan and plan to go back later, or will you live here all your life? Yes, I want to live here the rest of my life. Would you turn down an opportunity to go back to Japan? I don't want to go back, so that's why I brought my family here. So, he's answering honestly, but the board says he's a citizen of the Empire of Japan. He couldn't become a U.S. citizen anyway, as we all know, until 1952. And he's loyal to the Empire of Japan based on what? There's no evidence. See, there's no evidence he's engaged in any subversive activities, but he's pro-Japanese enough to be dangerous to the internal security of the United States. For that, he was shipped to Honolulu and then eventually Angel Island and then a whole series of other camps. Here is his documentation that he was in the prisoner of war enclosure on Angel Island and then later Lordsburg, New Mexico. But there were other stops in between, I believe. And here's his dossier and things like that. Yasuhiro Soga was a journalist, and so he wrote in Japanese, and it was great for us that he kept such detailed notes, because he wrote a book, or there was a book of his writings that was produced. Interestingly enough, members of the board inquiry said parole and no detention. He should be released. But the military members of the board, the three on each side, said he should be interned. And he was. And there he is at Angel Island again. Also called Fort McDowell at the time, if you see any documents that list that. And there he is in the red arrow. There would be photographers who would come to Santa Fe every once in a while, and for a fee, they take pictures. And the Hawaii guys seem to take a lot of pictures. We haven't found any of, like, my wife's grandfather yet. And this is the book that came out with his diary. Includes a chapter on his 12 days on the island. He mentions the people he met, the writings he saw on the wall, everything in great detail. Chokichi Sato, I call a double angel, because he came through Angel Island as an immigrant. We have his document here. He wasn't allowed to be an immigrant. He was a non-quota immigrant, so he was only allowed to stay, I believe, several years. So by the time the war broke out, he had overstayed his visa, basically. And here's all the stops. This is an internment card, which you can now find online on the website. I'll show you later. I have a handout too for later if people want to pick it up. And so here he went: San Francisco, Sharp Park, Angel Island, Fort McDowell, Santa Fe, and then finally released to Jerome, where he reunited with his wife, and then to Tule Lake, the camp which sent him up to be repatriated, basically. Asahara Yamada was he was a Konko minister related to Shintoism, and his wife was in Santa Anita at the time. He was a priest, and he had 4 children. They were all in Santa Anita. And then he went to Heart Mountain with his family and finally returned to run the church. So these cards have extensive details, including details of letters from their wife and family and so on. And most of these are affiliated with the actual case file, which you can get, which have these photographs that we're showing and other documents. And here's a memorandum to the chief about his life. And he's a Shinto priest. Therefore, he warrants his internment as a dangerous enemy. It's well-known so-called Shinto priests are notoriously advanced enemy agents and fifth columnists. So here's his time on Angel Island and the prisoner of war enclosure. There were prisoners of war held at Angel Island, including Sakamaki, who was the first Japanese captured after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. He went on to become a Toyota executive in Brazil, I believe. And there's Yamada's story. And we mentioned that sometimes we follow the money, and here he had $33.85 when he was arrested. And so that went into his personnel file. And here is a letter that he petitions that he be given a rehearing. And I've never violated any laws of my 45 years, and so on. Both my wife and I are, so their son is serving in the U.S. military, and he says, in other words, both my wife and I are glad to serve this country by giving our son away to this country. Imagine that, writing that. And then there's more documents about his immigration status. And there he is and his wife. They were ministers of the church in San Jose after the war. Motoyoshi is the man who was featured. His children talked about him being arrested. And there's his file, all the places he went, Niles, Sharp Park, Angel Island, Lordsburg, New Mexico, and places like that. And then petition from subject, my family is being broken. Permit me to be reunited with them at a family camp. And a letter back to him, I acknowledge your case is now under review. And he finally was allowed to rejoin them many months later. George Hoshida was from Hilo, and he was an artist and illustrator. He did this drawing of the camp on the island of Hawaii, and then this painting of Angel Island. Probably the only document we've ever seen done by anyone who was detained on Angel Island, immigrant or World War II. And Danielle's shaking her head, yes. So we're very lucky that this has survived, and his daughters donated it to JANM. And so I was searching online and found this listed, and so JANM licensed it to our exhibit. And he has a really sad story. He and his wife had several children. He was sent off to the different camps, and his wife was encouraged to join him in camp on the continent. And so she filed to go to Jerome, Arkansas with her children. Now they had a daughter who could not come along. She was disabled in a car crash. So she was in basically an assisted living center. And when they were in Jerome, she died in a bathtub accident, tragically. So he kept a diary as well, which Heidi Kim from University of North Carolina turned into a book as well. George Hishida, that was George Hoshida, this is George Hishida, is from Fresno, and he's the one who Grace, his daughter, told the story about him being arrested. And he had a photograph of the Friant Dam and pictures of U.S. machine gun and Golden Gate Bridge, and that's why he was arrested. And there's him with his wife, his daughter Grace, which you met on video, has a letter, very poignant letter, where she heard that the family was going to be deported to Japan, and she says, I don't want that to happen, basically. And fortunately, she got her wish, and the family was not sent to Japan. So this is a slide from the exhibit itself, where we talk about the Nakamuras, who I mentioned. There are two brothers, and one was sent to Angel Island and other camps run by the Army and Department of Justice. The other one was was allowed to reunite with his family at the War Relocation Authority camp. And so there we show their journeys, and Matsuchi didn't have so many places to go, but Sojuro had a lot of places to go, and Sojuro didn't. And then this is it's at Santa Fe now. There's a monument in honor of the people who were sent there. There's some things that were left behind, along with the documents, the carvings on the wall that you see mostly by Chinese and Japanese immigrants. There are some writings that Charles Egan found on the walls of the immigration station. Unfortunately, they're in a space like a closet that is now used as an elevator shaft. So you can't see them. You go in the elevator and you try to look around, but you can't see them. And here's Shindo just wrote his writing on the wall. Charlie was able to find that he was a druggist from Hilo, and George Hoshida did his sketch of him, which is this man here. And then a Japanese poem, Evening, the expectation that one day will bring escape, cold, bleak, June 4th. And we don't know who wrote this on the wall, but it was someone from Group 3. There were 7 main groups of ships that came to Angel Island. 3 more went to Sharp Park only. And then this is the exhibit that's in the former mess hall today. And you can also see it online. And if you get a handout, you'll get a URL to that site. It includes things like this wonderful 3D tour of the immigration station that Danielle was involved in making happen. And it includes voiceovers, and you can just kind of fly in. Did they use a drone? They must use a drone. Yeah, a lot of drones. Okay, so a drone tour of the whole area. And this is the guard tower that's still there. And these are some of the many books that have been written, almost all by people from Japan, from Hawaii. I've eagerly trying to find a first-person account of anyone from the U.S. continent, but we haven't found any. We've tried. Someone had some documents in her garage. If anyone has any here, let us know. But includes Soga's story, another by a man named Furuya, Otokichi Ozaki, Hoshida's story, Charlie Egan's book about the poems, and a local account that did not go through Angel Island. And then Gail Okawa wrote a book about all of the men from Hawaii, tells the broader story. Her grandfather was also part of this group. And then if you are looking for someone that you think might have been part of this internment program, and again, I'm using the term internment because that is one use of the word that is generally accepted for the people from who are so-called aliens, enemy aliens. But it's a Japanese internment card for my wife's grandfather, Kengoro Tonai. And when she was looking for the documents, they said, whoever wrote her back said, could he have been known by Tony? Tony? We didn't know him. He's Gengoro. But it turns out that was what he was called. Probably Gengoro was too hard to say. So if you go to catalog.archives.gov, you can put in a name, and you might find files there. And in our case, we found 2 of the first pages of the file, usually, which is the alien enemy docket. And it has 2 different sets of journeys that he was on, LA County Jail and Fort Missoula. This one has LA, Santa Fe, Granada, Fort Sill, and other places. So I encourage you to contact me. We have time to talk about the story of how we have been telling Roz's grandfather, Gengoro's story to the next generation. During COVID, she got some requests from cousins who said, oh, my kids want to know what happened to our grandfather. And I really don't know exactly what to tell him. So we said, let's make a game. So we said, okay, based on this is his journey. How can we tell this story to the young people? And so we sent out clues, paper clues. And during COVID, mail service was not very good. So most people did not get their clues in time for the Zoom call that we had, unfortunately. But we made it work. So we had maybe 10 cousins in the 4th generation who got these packages, including my daughter Charlene, who's in this room, and I don't know if another descendant, Susan Tonai, is here, but we sent it to people all over the world because we have cousins. My wife has cousins in Japan who are also family who wanted to know as well. So based on where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, where in the U.S. is Carmen Sandiego, we said, where in the U.S. is Gengoro Tonai? So Rod set up these criteria or objectives, all these rules of engagement, as she called them. And then no fighting siblings. That was a very important rule she had. So Roz is an executive director of the National Japanese American Historical Society in San Francisco. So she has a lot of experience doing education. So we have this family picture that the Tonai cousins found, which is wonderful because it has Gengoro, who is the one who was taken by the FBI on December 7th, and his wife and, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and then Roz's father, Min Tonai, who is very active in JANM and other groups here in LA, and then other family members. So here's clue number 1. We sent this out and say, what does this document say? And it says he was arrested on December 7th, 1941, and interned for the duration of the war by the U.S. Army. And then that was listed as Jean Doe, but that was really who he was. And then Tony Gengoro Tonai, there's the name of Tony, en route to federal authorities 5 days later. We had another clue was, so what do these documents mean? Well, these are documents by Toyone, Gengoro's wife, who says, my husband is not a spy, he's not a bad person. The store that they dealt with, Gengoro ran a produce market, and I think based in where the city market is now, in that area. And then a letter from this person who said, I have always found him to be perfectly honest, straightforward, and trustworthy. I have no reason to doubt his loyalty to the United States. And then another one from a neighbor, Mrs. Meacham, who wrote this. We were trying to find out what happened to her family so we could write and thank them, but we never found them yet. And then his status. So here is his fingerprints. Here are his fingerprints. And when he was, I'm not sure where he was. Oh, in Missoula, Montana. So he didn't go to Tuna Canyon or San Pedro, but he was immediately taken to LA County Jail and then sent off to Missoula. That's his first stop. Who 15 was, this is when he tried to be requested to be released to rejoin his family, and subject's camp record at Lordsburg is unobserved. The only record is barely fair. Possibly his camp record would be better if it were not for the fact that the subject is very deaf and cannot hear except when spoken to in a very loud tone of voice. But he still made a very favorable impression on the members of the board. He appeared to be relatively, completely candid and frank, and the board therefore recommends that he be released. So this is in 1943 in Santa Fe. And Clue 17, he's finally released. So the young people were encouraged to read the documents and try to explain what they were. They were generally ages 10 to 18 at the time. And then there's the group. So from all over the world, like I mentioned, Japan to the US. And I think one family did grow up in Chile. I don't know where they were when we took this picture. And then many of them all went to Amachi when Amachi had a archaeology day where you could go and learn from the people who were doing digging at the different sites. And so here they are, the descendants of these folks. The Tonais went back to LA after the war, but the Okas went to Chicago. And so the Chicago family didn't see the LA family that often, maybe occasional weddings. And these are the Chicago folks, and these are all the LA folks. And they all reunited on the foundation of the camp barracks where Min and his family had lived during World War II in Amachi. So now I'm finally ending. So if anyone has, someone going to introduce Melinda? Oh, here's Liz. So we'll take questions in a minute.
Thank you, Grant. In a moment we'll bring up Grant, Danielle, and Melinda, who's going to speak a little bit about her how she knows Grant. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was very interesting and informative, and just so many interesting stories. All right. I just want to welcome up Melinda, who's very much responsible for this partnership. So here you go.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate that you're spending this wonderful, beautiful Saturday afternoon with us. So excited. Dodgers won last night. Yay, go Dodgers. Sorry, Grant. I know you're in the Bay Area. Oh, okay, good. So I was trying to think about how did I meet Grant, and actually I knew his wife's name before I knew him. So in 2010, I was starting to do some research on my side of the family, my father's family, because my father died when I was 14, and I really didn't know a whole lot. And I was having a business trip. I was going up to San Francisco, and I found the National Japanese American Historical Society site, and lo and behold, I learned about the Congressional Gold Medal ceremony that was going to be held the following year. And found out, because I had just learned through my research, that my father was an MISer in the Military Intelligence Service. And so I had the opportunity to go to that Congressional Gold Medal ceremony in Washington, D.C. So I had seen his wife's name back in 2010 on that website, and so I was so appreciative of those resources. Fast forward to 2013, I drove up to Oakland for a genealogy workshop on how to discover your Japanese roots, and that presentation was given by a common friend, Linda Harms Okazaki. And I also learned about a workshop here that was being done by Chester Hashizumi a few weeks later. So I also went to that class. And it was after that class that evening, I thought, there's all these people interested in learning how to research Japanese roots, but everybody is doing their own research. There's no central resource. So just a grassroots effort. The Nikkei Genealogical Society it came out of discovering other folks interested in discovering their Japanese roots. When I was in that class here at JANM in 2013, sitting behind me was Madeline Yamamoto, and she was 9 years old when she was incarcerated at Manzanar. And she, at 81, wanted to start researching her roots. And so I volunteered and said, I'll help you. And it was that partnership, the networking, the ability to have meetings here at JANM was huge. So I think it was in 2014, I went to Angel Island for the first time. It was for the Angel Island, the Nikkei Angel Island pilgrimage that was sponsored by Nikkei Bay Angel Island Immigration Station. And I just went there as a participant and just really enjoyed the experience. My friend Linda Harms Okazaki was serving there as a volunteer genealogist. So 2 years later, in 2016, I started volunteering as well. And that was probably about when I met Grant. I actually think I met him earlier. We were at a DNA workshop in Berkeley. And so anyway, so I've known Grant since probably about 2015, 2016, definitely by 2016, and have been collaborating with him, volunteering for the Nikkei Angel Island pilgrimage. So that's every 2 years. The alternate years, it is at Wakamatsu Silk and Tea Colony. It was the first Japanese colony that was founded, I believe, in 1869. I volunteered this year for the first time for that event. So if you have an interest in going, I would say go to one of these pilgrimages. I know my friend Cheryl Matsumoto and her nephew Zachary have gone, but it's a wonderful experience. You take a ferry from either San Francisco or Tiburon and go over to Angel Island, and they have a day of programming. It's wonderful. It's usually the first Saturday in the month of October. One of the other connections I have with Angel Island, so we had the pandemic. We didn't have any in-person meetings here at JANM. Our first meeting at JANM was in July 2022, and I was just looking on my phone because I was trying to remember the dates. But at that meeting, one of our longtime members, Cheryl Yamamoto, was sharing that she had been contacted by Dr. Charles Egan, and her grandfather had writing on the wall there at Angel Island. And it's in chapter 1 of his book. So he had inscribed on that wall, "Get me out of here fast." In Japanese, but that's how it translated. And Dr. Egan contacted her saying, "We think this is your grandfather." His father, so her great-grandfather, was already here trying to bring over his, I want to say the daughter and the son-in-law, or vice versa. But anyway, so in 2022, so that meeting was in July. In October 2022, I'd volunteered again, and we found the inscription. We took pictures. So, I mean, it really comes full circle. As I was preparing for meeting topics for this year, with JANM closed, we weren't quite sure what we were going to do about meetings, but I always know that in the month of October, it's Family History Month, we always want to do something special. And Linda Harms Okazaki said, "Hey, contact Grant. He just did a presentation at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon," correct? And this was his presentation. I'm like, "Okay, Grant, come come do it for us in October too." So that's what happened with this. I also wanted to share, I brought some panels that are in the lobby area. And if you had a chance to take a look at them, each of those families had immigrant ancestors that came through Angel Island. So in 2023, I'm also part of the Santa Barbara County Genealogical Society, and we did an Asian American exhibit because there used to be a Japantown or Nihonmachi and a Chinatown in Santa Barbara. Who knew? I didn't know. But with that, we did research, we contacted families, contacted descendants, did interviews, and featured about 25 different families. And that exhibit is also online. But I brought those panels so you can kind of see the kind of histories and the diverse histories that some of our and experiences that our ancestors and family members had gone through both before the war and after the war. So And that's it for me today, so thank you.
I just want to shout out Melinda and her colleague, Suzanne Mori, who have come up to Angel Island, as she mentioned several times, and to Wakamatsu. And we have these mini consultations with people who want to know something about their ancestors. And in 15 minutes, we're able to find a lot of good information. But she drives all the way up from Santa Barbara to the Bay Area. So I got to thank her for that.
That just reminded me, I know we're going to do Q&A, but I also wanted to do a shout out for the National Archives. The National Archives in San Bruno is rich with documents. We try to find documents such as what we call A files or alien registration files, a lot of immigration records, consolidated files. At the National Archives in Paris, California, there's also enemy alien case files. Some of the alien case files, though, for Japanese American residents that were incarcerated, such as like at Gila or Poston, those may be at the National Archives in Kansas City. And I've been there twice. I've pulled records, I've reviewed records, but there's such rich documentation, and Grant's here, I'm here, Danielle's here, and just trying to help people find those records.
Thank you. So as our speakers make their way to their seats, please, everyone, if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Keep it a little brief, and I'll run a mic up to you so that everybody can hear your questions. But please feel free to ask anything. We have such a wealth of knowledge here between our three speakers today. And if people are still kind of gathering their thoughts, I don't know if there's a topic that any one of you all wanted to kind of start with after hearing Grant's talk or hearing some of the connections today.
Sure, yeah. As we're thinking about questions from the audience, and you can start raising your hands and mics can start to be run. But really inspired by thinking about October as Family History Month and also the different kinds of resources we have for you at the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. Angel Island is itself an island. It is difficult to get to, whether you're in LA or you're further north. You do have to take a ferry and then hike 1.2 miles and all of that. We do our best to make sure that our website has information that is helpful to you. So whether that's the SciArc exhibit, which is the 3D rendering sort of walkthrough situation, or if it's our Immigrant Voices archive, or if it's we have all of the poetry translated and a locator on it on our website as well. It's called the Poetry Locator. And so AIISF.org is a place to find all of that. And if we're not actively using these things and engaging with them and sharing our stories, these resources aren't out there for people. And so the more that you can help us share the information about Angel Island, share the information about family histories, and also go on to Immigrant Voices to find stories from the past and share your own story as well, to think about these connections past to present.
My question is about Angel Island. What happened from the closing in 1940? You said until 1940, and what happened between that interval and after until Pearl Harbor, and the closing after this detention center at the end of the war. Can you talk about that history? I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. So Angel Island has a rich history of being used by the U.S. military. Its first military outpost on Angel Island was during the Civil War. It was in the 1860s. It wasn't really used as defense at that point, but there was a concern that the Confederates were going to come through the Pacific. They didn't do that. But so the immigration station is open in 1910, from 1910 to 1940. In 1940, the federal government was already starting to look at bringing Angel Island immigration station, or bringing the immigration station off of Angel Island. That wasn't proving to be as useful anymore as it had once been. The burning down of the administration building sort of hastens that, and people are moved to Sharp Park. But those buildings, they still exist. And at this point, the writings on the wall, well, there's poetry on the wall of Angel Island, but the writings on the wall of that the U.S. is entering World War II, and that's becoming more of an issue. And so the U.S. government is aware that there's going to need to be places to to detain prisoners of war. And so pretty quickly, the U.S. Army, which was already on Angel Island in other areas, starting Civil War, but also growing in World War I and in World War II as well, pretty majorly, they sort of expand who's taking over that site. So pretty quickly, they turn over the site from Immigration Station to the Army to monitor it. After the Army is done with the site, it isn't until after the Cold War that the Army is really not using the Angel Island as a site anymore. There's a Nike missile site. A Nike missile site. I actually had the chance to go down into it one time. You're like not really allowed to do that by the public, but I was with people. It was very cool. I have videos on my phone if anybody wants to come see them. But that it's a long period of time where the U.S. government is really running Angel Island for military purposes. And after that, there was a real question of what happens to Angel Island. There were many different plans. There was a plan to run a freeway through Angel Island. Really glad that didn't happen. And it takes a while for it to become a California state park, and what it meant as a California state park and who that was for and what was happening with it was a big question as well. After it becomes a California state park, the state wanted to burn down the immigration station. And it was from a group of really tremendous volunteers who wouldn't take no for an answer, who were stubborn as heck, who fought for keeping it as an immigration station there for posterity, for a museum site.
We were very lucky because among the park rangers was a man named Alexander Weiss in 1970, or maybe just before then. He was a student at San Francisco State University, and you all know that there was a third world student strike at the time. And so when he heard about these writings and he went to go look at them, he contacted some of these new Asian American professors who were teaching at State, and they organized people that Danielle's talking about. There were amazing volunteers who fought to keep it open. First, they said, "Oh, we should document all this work," and then they said, because they thought it was going to be torn down for this picnic area or campsite, and then they said, "No, we can't let this get torn down." So they got funding from the state to do a study and then eventually preserve it. They got money from the federal government, from the state park bonds measure, which y'all may have voted for. Thank you very much, many years ago. But also, Alex was a perfect person. He was a freedom rider in the South. His parents were refugees from the Nazis, and during World War II, along with them, he came. And so, yeah, how perfect was that he would have the knowledge and also the heart to want to save it. But as he describes his work, he says, "I didn't really save it. I got in the car, turned on the engine. Other people drove the car and made it happen." So it was Asian American activists started by Alex who made this happen. So we're all very lucky. Question? One more.
Question is to Grant. You made a reference of Angel Island to Ellis Island.
Right.
And then you said that it's nothing like Ellis Island. Ellis Island was welcoming, immigrant welcoming, whereas Angel Island was like a guard gate preventing or whatever, immigration kind of stuff. What is the future aspiration for Angel Island? Is it to make it somewhat like Ellis Island, which is more of a positive national historic site, whereas Angel Island, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I've always seen it as a tourist site in San Francisco, and I was not aware of the history behind Ellis Island for the 60 years of my life that I spent here in this country. So the future of Ellis Island, I think, as a national historic site is what I would like to know more of, whether it's at this forum or maybe afterward.
Yeah. You mean Angel Island, the future of Angel Island, right?
Angel Island,
oh,
yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
What did I say? Ellis Island?
That's okay. I know what you meant. I think, well, the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation works hand in hand with the state park. And they recently opened up a new museum, which Danielle can talk about, called the Angel Island Immigration Museum, telling the story of U.S. immigration beyond Angel Island, what has happened since 1940. And I think they're trying to establish a dialogue for people to understand that Angel Island is just a part of immigration history. Maybe Danielle, you can say more.
I am very happy to say more. What I'm trying to pull up is we put together as a foundation, our staff, as well as our stakeholders, our board, and lots of people. We put together our mission, vision, and values. I'm not going to read you all of our mission, vision, and values, but our vision does help us start to think about what do we want Angel Island to be. I'm going to read that, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. But our vision is Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation is committed to a future in which all persons across the U.S. understand the history of immigration through Angel Island. Leverage this knowledge by treating immigrants with increased respect and empathy, and are committed to increasing equity, justice, and belonging for all communities. So the reason that Ellis Island and Angel Island are different as ports of entry is because of racism and because of the population of who was coming through each port of entry. Ellis Island had a largely white European population that was entering through, and very quickly established a mythology that immigrants were welcome in the United States. When we look, I call that a mythology on purpose, not because I don't want that to be true. I do want it to be true. I want all immigrants to be welcome in the United States. But these ports of entry wouldn't need to exist if they didn't exist to exclude people. The reason for Ellis Island and Angel Island were to allow in the quote unquote safe immigrants, the people who were healthy, the people who had enough money, the people who were not seen as a threat to the standard American way of life. And so at Ellis Island, that story making was easier because in order to come through Ellis Island, most people were coming in were European, were white, and they were processed through Ellis Island in about 3 to 5 hours. That's the average length of stay on Ellis Island. On Angel Island, the average length of stay is about 3 to 5 days. And if you're Chinese, that stay is much, much longer. If you're white, that stay is much, much shorter. But we have a much broader window of that. And so our idea wasn't to ignore that history, but was to take that history and learn from it and use that to try to establish an educational foundation to create a more just America. But you're right, we aren't learning about this in school. I barely learned about Angel Island in school, and I went to school 20 minutes away from Angel Island. I am a product of the public school system of the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to Angel Island on a field trip. We didn't go to the immigration station. My takeaway was that the raccoons were really big. There are no more raccoons on Angel Island. They were all eaten by the recently arrived coyotes. It's a different story, though. But this is all to say that our vision is that everybody does know about the history of Angel Island and that we learn about the exclusive immigration laws that the U.S. has had since the federal government took over immigration laws with the Page Act of 1875, saying that Chinese women weren't welcome into the United States unless they could be proved to be the wives of wealthy merchants. Right. And so all of this is part and parcel to the same issue of some histories being seen as more valuable than other histories, some people being seen as more valuable than other people. But we also know that the more we come together, the more we share these stories, the more everybody has to listen.
There's a question over here somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm curious. So my mother came to Angel Island in 1946 from Japan. She was 12 years old, and her father was classified as an enemy alien. And where would she, but she was separated from her family and kept there for almost a month. where would they have kept a 12-year-old girl, Japanese girl, in Angel Island in 1946? Do you know? And also, would I be able to find records? I've looked for, and it seems like 1946 kind of is outside of the.
Yeah, that's
like they don't know that this was still happening. You know,
that's probably she probably didn't come through Angel Island in '46 because they weren't using it as an immigration station.
they were moved to Angel Island. They immigrated after World War II. They immigrated to Seattle, and then they were going to go to Vancouver and relocate there from Japan. And instead the government took them, and when they came off the boat in Seattle, and shipped them to Angel Island. Okay. And then they were there for about a month. They took all of their assets and then dropped them off on a corner in San Francisco.
I would love to see your documentation.
No, these are only,
stories
by family.
Because it might have been 630 Sansom Street, which is still in existence today. That's where we've actually taken tours with people who had immigrated later in the 40s, and it's now an office building where they process people.
My mom says she remembers seeing from the barracks, seeing the water of the bay and seeing San Francisco, and also that there was a German prostitute that was the other woman that was there, and she kind of took care of her a little bit during the month. I know, it's a very
interesting,
unusual story.
There's lots of things to think about in that, right? And it's so hard to say for sure one thing did or didn't happen. And one thing I know for sure about the history of Angel Island is that, and history in general, is that we have all of these different kernels that we try to put together. And memory is so difficult to also be working within. From 630 Sansom Street, you can see the bay, right? Yeah, and so it's possible that it's like these stories that end up conflating of being like, oh, I had a really terrible experience and I was confined and I was detained, and then starting to learn like, oh, that's Angel Island. I interviewed a man 2 years ago in his 90s, and he was certain he was on Angel Island. And I found a bunch of paperwork, and he was most definitely not on Angel Island. But because of the way that stories start to grow, and that you can see the bay. And so you see the bay, and you see lights across, that's Oakland. And so it still looks like a city. So I think a lot of that might be coming together in that story, but it's still an important and worthwhile story.
But if you contact me, I'd be happy to look for the file. Maybe I could find it. You never know.
And you can reach out to me too.
Yeah, Susie.
We partner together a lot.
Yeah, Melinda could find it. But because when I was at the foundation, we had a trunk donated by a Russian family, and they were certain that their grandmother had come to Angel Island. And Judy Young, historian, found that she had come through Seattle. But later, the family she was a nanny for came to San Francisco, and then they went east. But she would see Angel Island because she took the ferry to Marin County at the time. So it's interesting. I'm not totally doubting your family, but I know Angel Island wasn't used in '46 for processing. So we'll try to get to the bottom of this. This will be exciting.
I think we have time for one more question if anyone in the audience wants to raise their hand.
Okay.
Really quick, when is the next Angel Island pilgrimage?
As Danielle mentioned, it's always the first Saturday in October, every other year. So next year is the Angel Island year. So look on the nichibei.org website, and they will publicize it starting next summer, probably. But yeah.
And Tammy, I always try to look for that and share reminders with the Nikkei Genealogical Society. I do want to make one correction too. I was thinking about this. The writing on the wall at Angel Island, I said Cheryl Yamamoto, Cheryl Yamashita, so I just wanted to correct that because that was an important story that she shared.
And the pilgrimage is an amazing thing to be part of and come to. And we have other programming. And so look us up, the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. Sign up for our newsletter. And we have programming almost every month. On island, we tend not to do anything from December to March because the weather gets weird and ferries and whatnot. But we have things on island all of the time. Next year on June 20th, you are among the first of the public to know this information. So you should feel very, very special. You can't find any of this online yet, but June 20th is going to be Family Day of next year. Family Day is when we offer extraordinarily discounted tickets to be able to come to the island and partake in family programming.
If you're interested in more, pick up a handout on your way out. Are we good?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. One round of applause for our speakers today. Is such a wealth of knowledge. Please feel free to ask them anything. It sounds like we have at least one person looking into their family history. If you are also looking into your family history, these are wonderful people to tap into today. But thank you, Grant, Melinda, and Danielle for being here today, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you all.